Overview. The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F*** by blogger Mark Manson is a candid self-help guide for anyone who needs a dose of inspired but realistic perspective on their path of self-development. Manson's personal experience in self-improvement is the cornerstone of his philosophy. He argues that people should learn to care less, or in his parlance, give fewer f***s about things in life that don't really matter, such as material possessions or other people's opinions, and to care more about the priorities that do matter, such as solid relationships and finding genuine happiness. According to most self-help literature, maintaining a positive outlook is paramount. Yet often, when people try to look only at the bright side of situations, they ignore reality. This denial creates more problems because it keeps people from responding effectively to the less than savory aspects of their character and the more challenging parts of their lives. By embracing hardship and personal flaws, people are in a better position to navigate difficulties instead of ignoring them. People should therefore be radical in their acceptance of pain and difficulty. It doesn't do any good to deny these things or to believe oneself entitled to permanent happiness. Introspection will help people determine their own values for themselves so that they can make more informed and wise choices based on what truly matters to them. Then they can truly give no f***s about anything that doesn't align with their core values. This will allow them to navigate difficulties without having challenges or setbacks affect their self-worth. Although it may seem counterintuitive, accepting the impermanence of life can help people to live fully in the moment and be more selective in what they choose to care about. Key takeaways. 1. People should stop trying so hard to be perfect, accomplished, and happy. 2. Embracing pain can make people happier. 3. People find happiness by solving problems, not by ignoring them. 4. People who feel entitled to happiness, success, and adoration have a distorted view of the world. 5. People should identify and prioritize values that are constructive and care less about everything else. 6. People should take responsibility for their problems, even those that are not their fault. 7. People should cultivate a sense of curiosity instead of assuming that their feelings, including those of disapproval, are correct. 8. Failure is a virtue. 9. Healthy relationships are built on honesty and trust, not toxic dynamics of victimhood and rescuing one another. 10. By accepting the inevitability of death, people can find more meaning in their lives. Analysis. Key takeaway 1. People should stop trying so hard to be perfect, accomplished, and happy. When people are continually focused on external markers of accomplishment, they tend to become unhappy because this focus only reminds them of what they don't have. If people are truly thriving, they don't need to recite affirmations that they're happy, worthy, or successful. For some people, however, halting a pattern of seeking external success isn't easy or natural. Writer Suzanne Juliet had been struggling with a book project, not because she actually felt inspired to write the book, but because, she writes, "I wanted direction, and so I started writing a book, thinking that this would cure my existential angst. But I was motivated by desperation, not truth, and it showed." When she realized that her book in progress wasn't going very well, she decided to stop trying. Instead of feeling pressured to produce, she focused on doing activities that made her feel good, like exercising and eating well. A few months later, she had a sudden epiphany about how to write her book. She started writing and didn't stop until she was done with the first draft 9 months later. This experience was so gratifying that it made her realize how important it was to let go of expectations. The next time she found herself at a creative crossroads, she looked back on her earlier experience, decided to radically embrace letting go of expectations, and adopted "F it" as her new life motto. As Juliet's experience illustrates, people can find freedom and even exuberance when they stop placing pressure on themselves to achieve an external marker of success. That is, when they stop giving a f***. Key takeaway 2. Embracing pain can make people happier. People avoid feeling pain by distracting themselves. Sometimes they do this by drinking, playing video games, or getting involved in unsatisfying love affairs. Yet pain is inevitable, and it's important to confront difficult feelings and emotions in order to grow psychologically. Without pain, people might not figure out what their best course of action is, especially if it's a hard decision like leaving an unhealthy relationship or unfulfilling job. Burlesque dancer Madeline Harris, a 3-time sexual assault survivor, is no stranger to pain. After she was raped in high school, she turned to crystal meth to help her numb her feelings about what had happened to her. Eventually, she went into therapy where she was finally able to reckon with her traumatic experiences. To help herself cope with the indignity of rape, Harris decided to create burlesque performances that narrate her own rape and healing process by using cue cards to explain her painful but redemptive story to the audience. The final card explains her motivation to dance. To sexualize myself on my terms. She explains, "To me, burlesque is the exact opposite of being sexually assaulted, because you don't ask for anything at that time, but when you do burlesque, you choose all of it. Every piece of it." Harris was able to find a greater purpose in her pain by confronting it and inviting audience members to witness the intimacy of healing. She established More Than No, a nonprofit organization that uses the arts to raise awareness about sexual assault. Harris's story exemplifies the importance of facing pain and of using it as a guide to find a larger purpose and happiness. Key takeaway 3. People find happiness by solving problems, not by ignoring them. People should be proactive about finding solutions to their challenges. Happiness depends on people's ability to take concrete steps to solve their problems instead of letting them fester. When best-selling author Gretchen Rubin decided that she wanted to create more happiness in her life, she found that taking action was a crucial step in achieving her aims. In The Happiness Project, 2009, she describes how she spent 1 year conducting an experiment to see if she could maximize her happiness. She decided to keep a list of resolutions that would help her identify the concrete actions that elevated her happiness. She applied these resolutions to different areas of her life, such as her marriage and her spiritual life. In the realm of work, Rubin realized that she had a problem. She missed the companionship of working with others because writing, her chosen field, is essentially a solitary task. She knew that cooperating with others was a major source of her happiness, so she organized a writer strategy group with 2 friends based on the idea of mutual improvement. Her friends embraced the idea. They began meeting regularly to discuss matters of importance to their work, such as whether to hire an assistant to plan a book tour. Rubin's actions improved her happiness immensely. Her proactiveness in forming the strategy group is a perfect illustration of ways that people can directly and concretely address problems in their lives. Key takeaway 4. People who feel entitled to happiness, success, and adoration have a distorted view of the world. Over the last several decades, many parents and teachers have taught children that they are exceptional. This is a problem because not everyone is exceptional. Excessive self-regard can keep people locked into selfishness because they depend on being in situations and relationships in which no one challenges their identity as an extraordinary individual. These people become entitled and unhappy because they have built their whole lives on gaining external validation. Kathy Caprino, a former marriage and family therapist, explains that teaching children to have excessive self-regard can have disastrous consequences and prevent them from becoming successful in the future. She writes, "Kids eventually observe that mom and dad are the only ones who think they're awesome when no one else is saying it. When we rave too easily and disregard poor behavior, children eventually learn to cheat, exaggerate, and lie to avoid difficult reality." In Caprino's view, parents who praise their children indiscriminately raise future adults who will lack essential coping skills and feel damaged when their experiences don't conform to their entitled ideas of how life should be. Key takeaway 5. People should identify and prioritize values that are constructive and care less about everything else. People base their entire lives around the things that they value, but it becomes a major problem when they value too many things at once. They might value being wealthy, having a wild sex life, being held in high esteem by their peers, and establishing solid relationships. But people who give a f*** about everything are destined for unhappiness. It's more realistic and more conducive to happiness for people to be selective about what they value and build their lives around priorities that can be attained. In The Code of the Extraordinary Mind, 2016, self-help author and entrepreneur Vishen Lakhiani cautions against setting goals based on other people's values and expectations. He suggests that people differentiate between means goals, or accomplishments that society deems to be a marker of success, like graduating from college, versus end goals, which focus on obtaining personal happiness in the moment. Lakhiani believes that creating substantive and meaningful end goals will help a person feel more empowered. He writes, "To be happy, to consistently feel loving are all very good end goals. These types of goals are reflective of what a person values the most, and they are largely within an individual's control." Key takeaway 6. People should take responsibility for their problems, even those that are not their fault. It's hard for some people to accept that they are responsible for their emotional response to things that are not their fault. If a man gets laid off from his job, for example, he might be tempted to feel victimized by his boss, but choosing to believe that he is a victim will prevent him from reacting to his situation in an empowered and proactive way. It's important for people to accept accountability for all conditions and situations in their lives so that they can make conscious choices about how to best respond and ultimately exercise more power over their lives. It's not unusual for people to find themselves in a situation that they didn't cause, but which is ultimately their responsibility to negotiate. For example, a college student might find himself in a remedial English class because he went to a poorly funded high school and received a substandard education. His teacher might tell him, "Bad grammar is like coming from a dysfunctional family. It's not your fault, but it definitely is your problem." The student can choose to pity himself because he didn't have access to a quality education, or he can become determined to learn proper grammar to help himself succeed. Best-selling author Jeanette Walls is a prominent example of someone who chose to be responsible for her life circumstances. In The Glass Castle, 2005, Walls recounts her challenging childhood as the daughter of two poor and mentally unwell parents. Despite some extreme odds, Walls escaped the dysfunction of her childhood and ended up with a successful journalism career, a happy marriage, and a posh Manhattan apartment on Park Avenue. In the book's opening scene, Walls describes what it was like to be in the back seat of a car being chauffeured to a high society event and look out the window to see her mother, now homeless, rooting through a dumpster for food. Walls was so upset that she asked the driver to take her home. She contacted her mother and requested to see her. She tried to give her mother money, but her mother insisted she didn't want it because she was perfectly happy. The contrast between Walls' present-day wealth and her poverty-stricken mother is stark, and it sets up the ultimate message of Walls' memoir, that it's possible for people to transcend their roots, even after a neglectful and abusive childhood, and to maintain love and concern for their parents. Had Walls decided not to take responsibility for her life and emotional response to her parents, she might have remained unhappy and felt like a powerless victim. Instead, she found loving acceptance for her parents, as well as her own choices. Key takeaway 7. People should cultivate a sense of curiosity instead of assuming that their feelings, including those of disapproval, are correct. Although there are few certainties in life, people often get stuck in their opinions and ideas about how the world should be. This closes them off to having new and fulfilling experiences. At times, it might be difficult for people to question themselves, especially if they are in the throes of jealousy, anger, or judgment. But introspection, especially with regard to a person's emotions, can be useful for facilitating change and personal development. Memoirist Vivian Gornick describes a breakthrough moment she had with her mother in Fierce Attachments, 1987, a classic story of mother-daughter discord. Gornick's mother, an immigrant, was judgmental and displayed little warmth toward her daughter, which resulted in lifelong friction between the two. One day, Gornick's mother told her that she read a book that Gornick had given her, a biography about trailblazing writer Josephine Herbst. As Gornick expected, her mother dismissed the book as boring. This perturbed Gornick, but she decided not to argue with or attack her mother as she normally would. Instead of fighting, she said, "Ma, if this book is not interesting to you, that's fine. You can say that, but don't say that it has nothing to teach you, that there's nothing there." Gornick's mother was surprised to find that her comments didn't trigger a fight with her daughter. After a few moments of silence between them, Gornick's mother finally admitted, "I'm jealous. I'm jealous she lived her life. I didn't live mine." Gornick's mother experienced an uncharacteristic moment of self-inquiry in which she was able to move beyond her dismissive judgments and get to the heart of what bothered her about the book. Being inquisitive about why people feel the way they do can help them to grow and learn about what they need to feel happier. Key takeaway 8. Failure is a virtue. Failure must be embraced as a necessary part of success. Hardly anyone excels on the first try, yet society often sends the message that failure is negative and shameful, and this message prevents people from embracing failure as a positive sign that they are making an effort. People who value external validation are especially sensitive to failure. However, some of the greatest success stories are made up of a million failures. Take the example of Dr. Sam Collins, a world-renowned executive coach who had made it a life practice to embrace her failures. Collins was 29 years old when she was fired from her ideal job. This turn of events was actually a relief to Collins, who didn't get along with her boss. But in the aftermath of her termination, she felt completely bereft and downtrodden. In addition to having no job and no financial security, Collins's mother had died, and she had no relationship with her father. She felt completely alone. However, this situation also made her think more carefully about what she ultimately wanted to do, which was to start her own business. Despite people telling her that she was too young and inexperienced to be an executive coach, she and her business, Aspire, both thrived. Collins says, "I highly recommend losing at least one job in your life because it gives you awareness and an aliveness you don't get when you have the same job for life." Today, when Collins encounters failure, she puts it in a long-term perspective. If she is persistent and tries to learn from her mistakes, she believes, then her work will eventually pay off. Key takeaway 9. Healthy relationships are built on honesty and trust, not toxic dynamics of victimhood and rescuing one another. Relationships can be meaningful and nurturing when both parties have solid and reasonable personal boundaries. Unhealthy relationships can occur when one person creates drama and adopts a victim mentality, and the other person rushes in to save that person. The person creating the drama believes that he or she can only get validation by playing the victim, whereas the person who fixes the problem is seeking validation and self-worth with his or her nurturing. Couples who are bound by a toxic dynamic often don't recognize that they're playing out a cliché of emotional dysfunction, nor do they often realize that they're pouring valuable emotional and physical energy into a harmful interpersonal dynamic and thereby robbing themselves of happiness. For example, a young man might be drawn to his girlfriend because she enjoys his help and constantly seems to need it. She is always finding herself in difficult situations, a fight with her boss, conflict with her siblings, or difficulty with her close friends. He likes being the person who can help her correct her problems by listening and strategizing solutions. Her constant conflict helps him validate his identity as a good, helpful person. He was raised in a home without much emotional validation, and the only times he felt appreciated were when he was being supportive of his mother's needs. So every time his girlfriend has a crisis, his default response is to try to fix her problems for her. This reaction won't create lasting happiness for either of them, though, because they are playing out a toxic dynamic of victim and rescuer. The next time his girlfriend comes to him with a drama, perhaps looking for money after she bounces a check, he should not instinctively offer her money or take on her own financial woes as his personal problem. He can be supportive and tell her that he's sorry she's in this predicament, but he should maintain some emotional distance and not try to fix the situation for her. If he is caring but firm about what he can offer, his girlfriend will have a better chance of assessing her situation realistically and perhaps realize that her money problems are part of a larger pattern obstructing her own happiness. If they can work together to change this dynamic, they can experience a relationship that is built on honesty and trust, in which they don't give f**ks about unhealthy drama or get weighed down by emotional codependence. Key Takeaway 10. By accepting the inevitability of death, people can find more meaning in their lives. Most people try to avoid thinking about the inevitable reality that one day they and everyone they know will be dead. People delude themselves by coming up with immortality projects, such as living vicariously through their children or starting projects or organizations that will outlive them. But immortality is an illusion. People who fully accept this are in a better position to live fully and create an authentic life based on their chosen values. One sign that many people understand the importance of acknowledging mortality is the growth of death cafes in the United States. At meetings, death cafe members confront mortality head-on. Participants discuss their biggest fears about dying and what they'd like to leave behind. John Underwood, the founder of Death Cafe, says that he envisioned a space where people can discuss death and find meaning and reflect on what's important and ask profound questions. Death cafes allow people to be less fearful and more open about a basic fact of life, which puts them in a better position to make decisions that they'll find truly satisfying. Discussing death helps people remember that their time is limited and shifts their attention towards the things that truly matter to them, instead of remaining distracted by what society deems as a worthy pursuit, the things they shouldn't give a f*** about. Important people. Mark Manson is a writer who blogs about self-help and happiness. His site draws approximately 2 million visitors per month. Author style. Mark Manson writes about life and self-help with an irreverent, engaging, and educational way. He uses stories from his own life as starting points for illustrating his basic philosophy. He is self-deprecating and candid when revealing his own missteps and character flaws as a way of modeling what it means to give no fucks. For example, Manson tells a story about tripping on acid to demonstrate the idea that the more intentional people are about being spiritual, the less spiritual they actually are. After making this point, Manson then addresses the reader directly, saying, "And yes, I just used my LSD hallucinations to make a philosophical point about happiness. No fucks given." Manson includes anecdotes about people he knows, as well as incidents in the lives of pop culture icons and philosophers, to craft an argument about how to create a life based on chosen values, personal responsibility, and concrete action. Manson's writing is sharp and often darkly funny. His anecdotes are original to his life, but his so-called philosophy is cliché. Author's perspective. Mark Manson's philosophy is the result of his personal experience. As a teenager, he was expelled from school and his parents divorced. He uses his personal story to illustrate how easy it is to crave validation for the wrong reasons and to avoid commitment out of fear. A close friend's death helped him reassess his choices, and he began taking more positive steps, such as enrolling in school and being accountable to his own dreams. He started his entrepreneurial career as a professional dating expert. Eventually, he decided to write full-time, which is one source of his happiness. His blog, markmanson.net, draws more than 2 million monthly readers and has been covered by the New York Times, CNN, and Time magazine. This has been Summary, Analysis, and Review of Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Counterintuitive Approach to Living a Good Life.